everyone. Welcome to our second in our spring series of Special Needs 101. This one, I'm sorry, fall series of Special Needs 101. This one on observation to action. Can everybody hear me okay and see me okay?
Yes.
Yes? Great.
Yes.
Excellent. First of all, welcome. It's nice to have you all here. I know a number of you were on our last webinar about differentiated instruction. And I think actually everybody who's here today is also signed up for the Challenging Conversations with Parents that's happening next month. As well as there's a couple of people who are not here today who will also be there, but we will all be again together then. So today we're going to talk about observation to action, kind of what do you do when you think something might be going on? How do you get a sense of what's going on with the kid? And what do you do with that information? It does dovetail a little bit with the parent conversation piece, because generally observations and things like that, the purpose of them is so you can then communicate to families about what's going on in problem solving. So we will kind of touch on a little bit of that today, but not much. It's hard to totally separate the two, but I'll save the main part of the content for the next one, so it's not repetitive for all of you. But since I know it's been a little while since we all got together, I'm wondering if we could just quickly go across my screen. I'll call on you, so you can tell us all who you are, where you work, and what made you interested in coming to today's topic. And since Rachel, you are the first person to my right on my screen, why don't you start us off? Yes, you.
Right? Okay.
You, Rachel.
I'm Rachel. I work at Temple Sinai Preschool, and I work with the 4- and 5-year-old classroom. And then when I signed up for this webinar, I didn't know how much it would very much relate to something that was happening in my classroom. This child's no longer in our school, but it will be, I think this will be very helpful.
Great. Good. I'm glad. We're glad to have you back. All right. Bob, I think you're next on my screen, so I'll call on you.
Oh, I thought my name was Temple Sinai. No, just kidding. I'm Bob. I work at Temple Sinai Preschool. I work as the support teacher between the threes. And I too, as Rachel, have had a few children in my classes that, some that I question if there's, that's where you always come in handy. That help us out a lot. And it's just, it'd be nice to be better prepared to deal with these challenges.
Great.
Presented.
Excellent. Glad to have you. And I changed your name to Bob, so everyone will know now. All right. Harriet, you're up.
Hi, I'm Harriet Schnitzer. For 19 years, I worked at Congregation Road of Shalom in San Rafael, and I was basically a reading tutor and a pull-out teacher, who all of you are always very happy to see because they wave to me from the window. However, the congregation changed their religious school curriculum, and I'm no longer working there. And about a month ago, I started working at a conservative synagogue on the peninsula in Foster City, and I'm doing a 4th grade class.
When are you doing that?
At the moment, I would say it's more Judaica. And I also am very happy to be at this conference, because there is certainly one student in my class who's definitely got issues. And unfortunately, when you have one who's got a problem, it's sort of like a contagion. So I'm happy to be here today for some knowledge.
That's great. So you're a Peninsula Sinai then?
It's a Peninsula Sinai, right?
Did you respond to that EduList ad that came out a couple of weeks ago?
I didn't respond. Someone by the name of Harrison.
Yeah, I know him.
I don't know who he is.
College with him. That's why I'm asking.
He's what? He's someone you know?
Yeah, I know him from college. Yeah. Anyway, there's this.
Okay. Anyway, he, I guess he saw my resume from somewhere, and he put me in touch with, actually their education director is also a rabbi.
Perfect.
And she's been very helpful.
Yeah.
Can you hear it anymore?
We can hear you. Is that Rachel Fair?
Can you hear me?
Hi, sorry. Yes, I can hear you now. I was having some complications with my computer, but now I'm on the telephone. So I don't know if you can see me, but I can hear you.
We can't see you, but we can hear you. So that'll be okay. As long as we can hear you, that'll be the most important. Great. Well, thank you, Harriet. Glad to have you. Christine, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, I'm the threes teacher, one of the threes teacher at Temple Sinai. I don't have to my knowledge, any child with special need this year, but I had 2 years ago, and you, David, came to my class, and I didn't understand at that time why you would, like, for example, to make a visual schedule. So it has helped me, like, understand, you know, what little things we can do around the classroom to address children process information the same way like anybody else. So I have a better understanding on why we do things, why we need to do certain things around the classroom to reach, you know, different learners. So
Great.
I didn't sign up on my own. I was signed up, but I kind of appreciate now to have another understanding of why we have to do certain things differently in the class, because you can get very like blind, you know, after a few years working in the same environment, you don't see why, you don't necessarily understand why we do things, why things are here and for a reason, you know, and that makes you like, it helps you like have a new fresh look at the classroom and see how you can improve your environment to reach, you know, like different learners. So that's pretty much where I'm at.
Thanks. Welcome. Ashley, our dynamic duo there, Ashley and Katrina, you want to tell us a little about the two of you?
Yeah, so we work at Gamma Tov. I'm in the Choose classroom, and I'm more excited about the action part. I feel like most of watching, like being around 2-year-olds is a lot of observation. I'm just ready for figuring out how to implement the next steps when you see something.
Excellent. How about Ashley Jerome?
Hi, I'm Katrina, and I work at Gamma Tov. I work with the 3 to 5-year-olds. And actually, last week we had our parent-teacher conferences, and we still have some going on throughout all this week. So it would be nice to just get some tips on how to like have these conversations with parents.
Yeah.
We have one parent who actually brought up some issues with us, so I kind of want to help them to like what their next step should be.
Great. Okay, wonderful. It's nice to see parents that want to support like that. Ashley Jerome, your turn. I'll unmute you.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm the new youth educator at Peninsula Temple Bethel in San Mateo. I'm predominantly working with the teens, like 8th through 12th graders, but I also work with like the religious school kids as well, more indirectly. And I run the Madrahim program, so they're the ones more directly with the kids. And actually a couple weeks ago, David came to talk to them and teach them about inclusion. So I'm here to really support the Madrahim and also the religious school kids and teens in general. And also I just love learning from David, so I like to take advantage of those opportunities.
Nice, thank you. Very sweet. Okay, Sarah Kluger, you're up. Oh, you're on mute. I'll unmute you. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm Sarah. I work at Temple Sinai in the fifth grade, and also with Beginning Hebrew, and I work with family school. And I was interested in this program just because it's always good to have more tools in your belt. And I've had kids in classes that kind of sway it makes the whole class change dynamic, and I thought it would be good to have some good tools.
Great. Excellent. And thank you. Welcome. Maddie, I think you're last but not least.
Hi, I'm Maddie Winard. I'm the Youth and Family Programs Director and Camp Director at Urban Adamah. And we're working on building an inclusion program. We have some kids with special needs that come, and we want to be equipped so that we can support them and set campers up for success and also set our staff up for success. So just trying to learn and grow and share that resource share the farm with as many campers and families as we can.
Thank you, glad you're here. Rachel Farrell, you're actually last but not least. Your picture's not up here, but I know you're with us. So tell us a little about yourself.
Awesome. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I'm Rachel. I know there's 2 of us on this webinar, and I work at the JCCSF Rosenberg site as the Child Development Specialist and Inclusion Specialist. So I work with all the staff to help implement strategies to support the children in their classrooms.
Nice. Excellent. Glad to have you too. Okay, so welcome everybody. Okay, so what we're going to do, a couple things. I know a lot of you have been on these Zoom things before. So first of all, just to let you know, if you are in full screen mode, when it comes time, I may tell you, I'm gonna put up a link in a couple seconds to in a few minutes to something called a Padlet, which is kind of a group bulletin board that we'll be able to all look at together once I share my screen. And you actually, when I put the link in the chat box in a couple of minutes, we'll be able to click on it and open it up for yourself so you can type onto the form as you'll see. But it will not work if you're in full screen mode, or it will be harder. So if you do think you're in full screen mode, make sure you switch out of that. And that's in the upper right-hand corner of the black Zoom box. It'd be 4 arrows going outward. And then to get out of it, there's a little thing that says exit full screen. Or you can also push escape and that will do as well. So that's just one thing for everyone to know about, because otherwise it's hard to switch windows, because Zoom's you have to do a little bit of switching. If you do have a question as we go, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can either just kind of say it at whatever point in the conversation it makes sense. You can also type something into the chat box. So if you look down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a little speech bubble with 3 dots that says chat. If you click on that, it'll open up the chat box on the right-hand side. If a message comes in that way, you'll see it flash orange. And you have an option to chat to everybody where we would all see your message, or just privately to 1 or 2 people if you have an internal question among, say Sinai folks or something that you want to ask each other before we say something out loud, that you can do that. Or you want to say something to me like, "You're boring me, can you please speed up?" Or whatever it might be, you can do that privately. So just want to let you know about those 2 things. So I am going to share my screen here so that you can see kind of where we're going. Okay, can everybody see that slideshow now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll see down at the bottom I have subtitles turned on. That is because we are, as I mentioned, recording this, and we'll make it available, and I wanted to be sure that there was some captioning for folks who need it in the future. It's not perfect, but it works pretty well. So here we are. This is Observation to Action is the name of the workshop. And here's kind of the agenda for the day. We're going to start out with a little cooperative thing called What Do We Know and What Do We Want to Know? Then we'll move on to the section on observation, then data collection, then reporting, and then referrals. And hopefully at the end, we'll have a little bit of time for some questions and answers. We're here until 3:30. I'll try to keep us pretty much on task and on track. So we're going to start with that. So I am going to stop my share now. And I'm going to put into the chat box a link for all of you. Okay, it's going to bring up a Padlet. So let me just make sure it's going to everybody. Here is the link. Let me know if you can all see that.
Right.
When you click on that, it will open up a screen that looks like.
Okay.
That looks like, that's not what you need. That's the list of who's here. That looks like, here, I'm just going to click on it myself. You all see this?
Yes.
Looks like that. Okay. So that is the screen that looks on. So we're in the section now that is over here, where I'm kind of mousing now, called What Do We Know and What Do We Want to Know? So to start, I'd just like each of you to, just take a second or two. It doesn't have to be anything, super thoughtful or well-formed, to push, there's a little plus button underneath that will let you add a post like I'm doing now. For the title, put your name. And then when it says write something, you can type in whatever you think you know right now. When you think about observation, action, what are things that you do know, right? And at the same time, over here, what do we want to know, which is the next column over, you can also type onto there, right? So that we just can get a sense and see from each other where we are right now. Is everybody able to interact with that?
No, I'm not. No.
There's no plus.
There's no plus sign.
So you need to open it up yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that because if you're just looking at my screen, you won't be able to do it. So if you go into the chat.
No, I did, but there's no plus sign when you click the link either.
Oh, really?
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
We can see what you put, but we can't, there's no plus sign for us to add on.
Weird. Okay.
Right.
If I can fix that. Hold on, give me a
Can
second.
you send us the link again?
Back to the chat box? Sure. Here it is again. Let me just see if I can quickly fix that. Okay, well, if this isn't, if for some reason it's not working, we can just do it by our voices. Hold on. Oh, okay. It's weird. No one's seeing a plus, huh?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I'm gonna
Is there a way to like share it? Oh wait, hold on.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
Is there a way to
I don't want to take a bunch of time to do that. I'm just trying to modify one
because
little.
I know with like Google Docs. Yeah.
Well, now it says add comment.
Here, I think, let me try this one more time if I copy this link. Let me see if this one's any different. I'm gonna try to put one more thing in the chat box. I'm just gonna see if it's any different. If not, it's okay. We'll just keep it going. No, that's the same link. Okay. Forget that typing it yourself. Why not just people shout out? What do you know? What do you want to know about this? I'll fix that for next time. Sorry, I'll figure that out.
About what section?
What are some things that you know about observation and how you kind of respond to it? What are things?
Like when you make an observation, it doesn't include judgment, so it's just making observations of things that you saw.
Right.
I think a question that I have is sometimes after you make those observations, what do you do? And how do you, given like low staff resources and space and safety, how do you make accommodations for that kid?
Great. What else?
I'm thinking well, I'm new at this school, so I've only been teaching there a few weeks, so I'm trying to get a sense of who the students are. And there, as I said, there's one disruptive student, and what I'm looking for is how disruptive will he be? Because when he gets out of control, he sort of tries to engage mostly the boys. And so I think I'm needing to do a lot of observation and just tiptoe into it.
Are there some
I can't hear you. What did you say?
Noise coming from.
There's some background noise. Oh, it went away now. I think whoever
It stopped now.
Whoever it was, I think muted it. Okay, great. Who else has something that they think about when they think about observation, or what they know or what they'd like to know?
I think for me, sometimes it's like I have an idea of what I want to do, but I don't know what the appropriate amount of time to observe before taking action is.
Okay, great. What else? Couple more.
I take into account everyone's opinion as well, because children interact differently with different teachers. And so to find that ground as opposed to something that's happening at home, all of that can implement and affect the day. So the strategy that I would suggest depends on who it's being interacted with and necessarily when.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does change definitely depending on the time of day, what's going on. I mean, even beyond that, even what mood is that particular kid in today? Did they eat enough? Are they tired? You know,
Right.
what's their emotional state? What's their physical state? There's a lot of things that go into it. It's all very dependent on kind of those. Yes. Any other comments or thoughts?
Maybe when is it appropriate to talk to the parents and reach out to them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a great question. When do we decide to bring things to the next level? And then kind of what follows that naturally is, if we're going to do that, how do we do it, right? And that's what we're going into deeply next time, but we'll talk a little bit about today as well. Okay.
Good. Oh, okay.
So I'm going to share the slides again. Okay, so here we go. All right, so observation. So you all already shared a number of things that you think about when you think about observation. And I always like to start with kind of why is observation a good idea? You've mentioned them already, some of them. But for me, it mostly comes down to the fact that getting to know your students is really the first step for identifying challenges, right? It's, if you don't know what's going on, if you're not getting to know them, then it's really hard to figure out where the challenges might be. You've got to do that, and you need to do it in a bit of a mindful way. Not only because that way you can figure it out for yourself, but because knowing and then being able to describe what's going on for the student is really critical when it comes time to talk to parents. Right? Because sometimes we get into things where we're not specific enough about what might be going on, or we don't have a clear enough idea among our teaching team about what might be going on. And that can be challenging when it comes to talking to parents.
It's also challenging, like the verbiage that you use with the parents, because, you know, I mean, you want to be, you know, you don't, I don't know, it's sometimes for me, it's hard to get out what I'm trying to say. And it's not my job. I'm the support teacher, so it's not really my job to talk to the parents unless one of the teachers ask me to. So.
But I think building a relationship with parents beforehand, you know, like having an ongoing contact with parents on a daily basis, sharing what you see as a matter of fact, you know, and kind of give you a sense of what parents are, where they stand, what they do. It's also contribute to improve parent communication. You cannot jump from observation, like talk to the parents without having that, establishing that the connection with parents, you know, like having a communication with parents already in there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also very, very important, definitely. And that's because you do, at the end of the day, you want to be partnering with parents, right? Or other professionals, if that's where you find yourself going, right? You need to have an observation outside of you needing to have an assessment, kind of a more formal evaluation. Yeah, I think having these data makes it easier to create those relationships, right? And we're getting to the parents, especially at the preschool level. We have people at different levels, ages of education here. So I think it's a lot easier generally for preschool teachers to build those relationships because the parents are there, so they're little, the parents are nervous, so they want to talk a lot. When you're in a religious setting with another team, you may have less of a relationship with parents I'm hearing a lot of background noise, so I am just going to mute everybody, and then you can unmute yourself when you want to speak, because I'm hearing a lot.
How do you unmute?
So unmute will be down at the bottom left of your Zoom. There's a little, or maybe even on your, if you can see your own picture, there will be a little thing down there. It's a little microphone symbol. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah. It's just, there's a lot of noise. One sec. Where's that setting? Okay, never mind. We're gonna just, all right, back to the PowerPoint. Sorry. Okay. So here's what we're talking about now. Okay. So getting to know your students, right? There's a number of ways that we do it. So the first thing that I always say to folks is, if you do know someone's diagnosis, if you happen to be aware that there is a diagnosis that exists, always take that into account when you're interpreting a behavior. Because you want to locate the challenge not in the student, but in the classroom environment or the lesson. If something is going on, right, there is a reason for it. And my personal bias in the way that I approach this work is I very rarely think, oh, something's going, you know, there's something, the problem is here with this kid. It's more, what do I, as the teacher, need to do differently? What do I need to change in the environment? Because I know this child has autism and therefore might have trouble in complicated situations. What can I do to meet that transition? I know this person has sensory challenges, so what can I do to, you know, minimize those? Right? It's really about the environment or the lesson that you do. Obviously, in preschool, you don't really have formal lesson plans, although you do have, you do have what you're choosing to do that day. There are a lot of, ways that you plan for the day. It's not a formal lesson plan, but when you're thinking about that, How do I make sure there's something out there for that sensory challenge, right? And behavior is usually the outward manifestation of something going on. They're trying to tell us something about that. If you don't know a diagnosis, you want to look for patterns, and that's where observation really first comes in, right? For example, if you're paying attention, you notice that Isaac is always wild just after recess, or just after Hasakah. Does Sarah, none of the Sarahs on this call, but another Sarah, shut down mostly when the classroom is loud and boisterous? Is that when this is happening, right? When things are loud? Does Zachary get aggressive mostly when other kids aren't accepting his ideas, right? What is happening? What are the things that are happening around whatever the behaviors are that are worrying me, right? And that's how we approach it. I heard a long time ago an educator talk about a strategic split of 10% and 90% in the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And this has really stuck with me over the years. So we were talking about getting to know kids and observation. And she said to me, she was the education director at a synagogue down on the peninsula. She's not there anymore. She said that the thing for her is that she figures in the beginning of the year, spending 10% of her time thinking about lessons and content and delivering that content. Spending 90% of her time getting to know the students. That's where really the majority is. Then by the end of the year, it switches. You have 90% of your time, lessons, 10% of the time getting to know your students because you already know them so well. And that was really instructive to me because the beginning of the year, you have this opportunity to get to know them. And if you focus more on that, it pays off dividends in the end. So even if you are in a place where there is content you have to get to, and a particular curriculum you have to stick to, right? It's really helpful to be able to think about how much of my time am I spending on that versus actually just getting to know these kids in the classroom. And the less time that you see the kids, so in a preschool you see them every day.
Okay, take care.
In a preschool setting, you might, right here, okay, oh, here's fine. All right. I found it. So everyone should be muted now. If you want to, if you go up to the top of the screen, that where you're looking at the slide, you'll see a little mute button up there. And if you want to talk, just uncheck it. Okay. But I muted everyone because the noise is still kind of going. Okay. So that's the 10%, 90% strategic split. That really stuck with me. Now, why else do we do observation? Well, it helps you do a lot of things. It helps you to know exactly what your behavioral concern is, number one, right? It helps you to talk with your co-teachers, right? It basically gets everybody on the same page. When you have observation and when you have data around it, you can really zero in on what the problem is. I've been in places where parents have talked to me about, a teacher has not been able to tell me really what my child is doing. It's more like, they're a little disruptive, they're making noise, but it's not exactly like what they are doing is shouting out when the rest of the class is quiet. And that's a problem, right? It's things like that. And to talk with your co-teachers about it, you can compare notes, right? Observation helps do that. And ultimately the goal of that is to be clear with yourselves so that you can be clear with parents. That's critical when it comes time to communicate, is to be really clear and know exactly what's going on. When you're going to go and talk to a parent, and again, we'll speak more about this in a month, you want to have specific examples in mind of what's been going on, more than one. So that parents can get a sense for what's actually happening in the classroom, right? Parents always want to know that stuff. Exactly, what is my child doing? What is the problem, So we need that. Okay, hold on, why is this? I'm gonna go backwards. Okay, any questions about that so far? That's all, fairly introductory kind of stuff, but are there questions about that?
David, I'm just wondering if you're gonna have any suggestions as to how to speak with colleagues about trickier topics like this? Like if a child is going through the IEP process or has a divorce or something, how can you communicate that to your team?
Well, I mean, it's a similar thing, right? It's just about having clarity and being able to talk about these things openly, right? With your team, I think there's always issues of confidentiality around some of these things. Within a staff at a school, that's less critical, because everybody, presumably is there and able to hear about what's going on with kids. So I think, again, we want to we'll talk about this, just like when we're talking to parents, we're talking with colleagues, we want to not so much describe the child or say something about the child, but really describe what's going on. So this child's family is going through a divorce. Right? So, and what we're noticing is that in class, it's making him or her more X, Y, or Z, right? And how can we all get on the same page about that, right? If you're in a place where you have multiple teachers seeing that child at different times, are you all seeing it, right? Is it just you? Is this particular child more forthcoming with you versus another teacher versus the third teacher? There's always relationships in these things, and sometimes kids are more comfortable either talking to or really letting their crazy behaviors out around particular staff that they may feel more comfortable with, So I think mostly we just want to be really clear about it, right? And not muddied up with a bunch of like obfuscating and like sugarcoating, I mean, if a kid is disruptive and you think it's to do that there's something going on at home, I think you just want to be really forthcoming about that. And that way everyone really knows what's going on. It's a little bit different than when you're talking to the class, obviously, and the other children or other parents about it. There, you got to use a lot more discretion. But among staff, I sort of feel like just being transparent about it, is the way to hear about it. If there are specific situations you're thinking about where you want a little more kind of like guidance on it, I'm happy to talk to you also afterwards, so that maybe we can talk a little bit more about that piece of it, if that works for you, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Did that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so anything else on all that observation stuff before we move on to data collection? No? Okay. Okay, so data collection. So, right, we do these observations, but how do we actually know what's going on? How do we track it? How do we communicate about it? How do we how do we do all the things I just said we should do, right? That's data collection. There's a number of ways that you can do it. Some are more involved, some are less involved. I'm always trying to think of things that I know teachers can do in limited time with limited capacity. So that's mostly what I've stuck to here. There are kind of a number of things. I have, which I'll show you in a minute, and also that Padlet, which we can hopefully go back to later, will also have a copy of this that you can actually just download and use for yourself. So with that Padlet link, I have all of these resources that I'm sharing with you are there, and maybe in between sections we can look at it. So daily behavior checklist is a very simple checklist that was developed actually with a parent at a preschool, where in really a couple of minutes, a preschool teacher can kind of track there were particular problematic behaviors that were going on, and they can track it really easily both in the morning and in the afternoon. Since at preschool, the kids are sometimes there all day, there's obviously there's often a really big difference between the program in the morning, the core program, and like the extended day program. The format is different. Sometimes you have kids that are blended by age in the afternoon, as opposed to being in the 2s or the 3s or the 4s class in the morning. The teachers are different. The kids are tired. Some are napping, some are not. So afternoon, some are leaving, some are staying longer. Afternoon, usually is more variable. So that's why we divide it up into morning and afternoon. And I'm going to show it to you in a moment on a slide. And then on the Padlet, you can get a copy of it. And it's a simple checklist because preschool teachers, you don't have time to write detailed notes, narrative about every single little thing that's going on. You got a billion things going on. You got 20 little kids in the classroom or 15, right? So I try to make it easy. And actually, it's useful beyond just preschool. But that's what we came up with. And it's a good way of reporting that to parents and also comparing notes between teachers. So we'll go more into that in a second. There's another one called an antecedent behavior consequence chart. Some of you may have seen that. That's a more behavioral approach, which is basically tracking when there is a particular behavior, say a bite, right, or a hit, what happened, or a shouting out of a 4th grader, right, making a silly joke, right, and if that's a problem, what is the antecedent? What happened immediately before that, right? What was the behavior? And then what was the consequence? Not consequence in terms of penalty, punishment, etc., but what happened either immediately after or as a result of that behavior. It could be I pulled the kid aside and talked to him. It could be everybody laughed and it got worse. It could be I got really mad and yelled, and then I had to apologize later, right? There's a lot of things that you can put in there. And the last one is just anecdotal or video data. So that's one that's less formal than those first two. And it's really a short, sweet, specific note about something that went on. If you're allowed to take video in your classroom, that's a great thing to do. I sometimes, when people want me to come and observe, they'll take a video first and send it to me. Or if I can't observe, I can look at a video and tell you what I think. Video is useful, but they can't be long. I don't want you to have to make a 20-minute video or write, paragraphs and paragraphs about what happened. But anecdotal data is also useful, right? For when you don't want to use the more formalized things. So here's the daily behavior checklist that I was talking about before. So you can see there's a space for the date. There's in the morning, in the afternoon, and that line there is for the teacher or teachers who are reporting, right? Where you can write. And so these were the categories of things that were happening with this particular child, right? There are the sort of like challenging things, which were physical and verbal. So this was a kid who was doing a lot of kicking or pushing or hitting or biting. You can also put, there's a space for other. Then verbal was yelling out loud, saying mean words, right? And then a space for number, right? So you can really easily, in like less than a couple of seconds, just take a note about how the morning went. Yeah, something physical happened 3 times. It was pushing, I'm going to circle it, 3, right? Or whatever it might be. Then the third box there, was the child redirectable, right? Meaning, could you get them to go do something else? Could you get them off of whatever that behavior was? And the answer is, I often could today. I sometimes could, or no, I couldn't do that at all. That was not working at all today, right? And this is just for the morning on the left. You have the same thing on the right for the afternoon. It's the exact same stuff. And then we also added 3 things that we like to see, right? Cooperative play, child being helpful, and child behaving in a kind way to others, right? What's the frequency of that? Did it happen often, sometimes, or not at all? And then there's a space at the bottom for comments, right? We did it this way because we don't want to only be tracking the things that we struggle with, but we want to be tracking the things that we love about the kid too, right? Even, I was a teacher for many years in religious school. We all have kids that we are more fond of and kids that we are, shall we say, less fond of, right? But even those kids that we may get the most frustrated with, we can usually find good things. And we were tracking not only the stuff that was challenging, but the stuff that was good too. So that you can report to the parent, yeah, but he was also really helpful. She also was really kind today. Or, wow, today was an awful day. There was all this physical stuff and they weren't kind or helpful and didn't cooperate at all, right? Morning, afternoon, right? So that's one thing. This is adaptable. You can kind of make whatever categories you want. And it doesn't have to be split up in a morning and afternoon. That's the format that we came up with for this particular preschool classroom. And it worked pretty well for that. Here's an ABC chart. So it may be a little tough to see, but you can see there's a space on the left for the date and the time. So when the behavior occurred, what was happening when it occurred? Was it during quiet reading time? Was it right after Hafsakah? Was it during circle? Was it at lunch? Was it during, free choice station time at the preschool? Whatever it might be. Then there's so that you can track that. Maybe this is happening more often, as I said before, after recess, right? Maybe it was a crazy loud game of, I don't know what, Simon Says, right? And it got really out of hand and then somebody lashed out, right? It's helpful to know what was going on so that you can figure out what the behavior might have been rooted in. The antecedent is what happened right before the behavior that may have triggered it. You don't have to know for sure that it did, but that you think maybe these things happened really close together. It might have triggered the behavior, what the behavior was, and there it's really just what it looked like. It's not about what was going on for the kid. It's not about they were mean. It's not about that. It was they reached out and hit their friend in the arm, right? And did it again, and their friend cried, right? They insulted the teacher, right? Whatever it might be. So it's really describing the behavior, not the kid, right? Kind of clinical, just what you can see, right? What did it look like? That's why it says there, what did it look like? Not what did it feel like, not what do you think was going on, what did it just look like? And then the consequence, what happened after the behavior or as a result of the behavior. And that could be anything. If it is a place where he's asked to go, it could be as simple as check in with the friend. It could be, if this was like the last straw in a long day when things were happening over and over again, had to go take a break from the classroom. It could be, I suggested using a sensory tool, a fidget or something. I suggested going and doodling and calming down for a little bit. Teacher took him and read with him in the corner for a few minutes. He went to the quiet space. Whatever it might be can go in there, right? So you're just tracking it. So those are a couple. Any questions about those two like forms? And again, in that Padlet that we'll come back to, you will have copies of these that you can download and use yourself.
Awesome.
Bob, oh, not a question.
Oh, no. I was just saying awesome because I'm trying to write everything down.
I will also send you the slides.
Okay,
So you don't need to write down everything on the slides.
Okay.
I'll send it all to you. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
And I apologize if you already said this and I missed it, but is one of these like for internal sheets that you don't share with parents, or is the idea to always be sharing this with them?
So that's up to your discretion, right? I think it's useful because it can be shared with parents. And truthfully, when you're sitting with a parent, especially one who maybe is resistant, it's really nice to be able to say, look, here's the sheet where we were tracking it. Here's the things that happened, right? I'm not judging your kid. Like, I love your daughter, but like, she's wonderful. We love having her here, but here's what was happening and we took data on it. You can see that, right? You can also use it internally. The first one, the daily behavior checklist, that one specifically was designed to be shared with the family, so they would get a sense of what was going on. That was another thing that, in preschool that happens. Sometimes you have parents who are just there for drop off and there for pickup, and it's hard to, talk. So it's nice to be able to share that and let them know what was going on. So you definitely can, but you don't have to. And the same with this, right? So that's up to your discretion. You could also do this internally and then create a different copy that you're going to share that has less, I'm so pissed off right now or whatever, whatever it is you might have written in there in the moment, right? It's more legible because you're not writing it fast. You can do that, but that's up to your discretion or your team's discretion. Great question. Couple other ways of doing data. So there's time sampling. This one, depending on your setup, it might be something that a support teacher, someone like Bob say, if you don't need him actively working in the classroom at the moment because you've got it covered, he could come in and do the time sampling. What you need for time sampling, that's really just making kind of a detailed log of what's going on for a particular period of time. It's really good for determining patterns of behavior. It's good for figuring out a kid's attention span. It's good for knowing when and how to use tools in a short period of time because you can see it all right there. Right? You're writing it out, what's happening with time. I'll show you a couple forms, or you can just write it out longhand, which is what I do, and I'll share that with you too. There's more formal things. There's something called STARE, which is a routine-based assessment, which basically breaks up the parts of the day into various routines: arrival, circle time, snack, Hafsaka, and you can, I think you can maybe even fill them in. And it has a rating, you'll see in a minute, but it has a rating of how engaged they were and what the behavior kind of looked like. It's free. It's also going to be on that Padlet. So you can just download it right from there. And then there's also the most formal, which is the developmental observation and assessment, which is like a big one that gets used a lot is called the Ages and Stages questionnaire. That's a more formal assessment tool for which there is a cost. However, once you have it, you can make copies and use it as much as you want. So that's a thing that you could do. It's really good for global assessment, right? That's also a thing that you might have a professional come in and use. You might not have to use it yourselves, but I just wanted you to know that it's out there, right? And it's a pretty easy to use questionnaire, but it's really about what is this kid's functioning looking like across many different areas. So time sampling that we talked about. So this is one way that you can do it. This is like an Excel doc, where there's a student, the class, and the dates, and then you've got a space there for time. You've got a space there for the activity that was going on, and you've got a space there for the behavior. And it's just charting it out like that, right? You can do that. They have really detailed ones where if you Google image search for time sampling data collection, you'll get tons of resources that have, time periods broken down in 10-minute increments or less, right? You can do all that if you want to. You also can just write it out longhand with a timestamp, right, in a notebook, which is what I do when I go and observe kids. Many of you have had me come and observe in your classroom. You have seen me standing there with my notebook and my pen writing stuff down, right? That's pretty much what I do. And then I can see patterns, right? I just find that easier to use for my brain than the sort of more regimented ones, but some people really like having the columns. It's whatever makes sense for you. I'm going to show you an example here of this is actually an observation that I did last week, literally. And I really just transcribed my notes from my notebook onto the slide. So the kid's name was Matthew. He's 2, so he's really little. And he's in the 2s class in his preschool. It happened to be a preschool assessment. And what the director was concerned about was that he was showing a lot of aggressive behavior. right? And they didn't know how to control it, right? They acknowledged he's really young, right? But this was the challenge, and they wanted me to take a look. So that's what I did. So I'm not going to, I was there for a good half hour or so in his class, but this is just one little snippet. Okay, so here, these are literally my notes. Now you will see here, the kind of main bullet points is this. What I'm doing here is maybe a little different than what you were doing, because I am also making notes to myself about what I might suggest, right, for an accommodation, what I might think a teacher may have missed, or an opportunity that was there that wasn't fully acted on, right? So you'll see the main line is what I saw, and then the bullet points underneath are my notes to myself that I might put into a report, but it's mostly there for me to keep my thoughts in check. So at 11:08, this kid Matthew walked over to Elliot's shopping cart and he said, "Mine." It was a little play shopping cart like you have in classrooms. Elliot said, "Mine." They started to yell at each other and they went back and forth until the teacher separated them, right? Happened at 11:08 a.m. It was about a minute, right? And then it was over, right? But this happened. So once that finished at 11:09, Matthew went over to his cubby, took out something from his lunchbox and brought it back. The teacher saw it and made him put it back. It's not time for lunch yet. We're not eating right now. He got very upset about this, right? So she, again, continued to point out, it's not lunchtime yet. I had a suggestion there. A first then board is something you may be familiar with. If a kid is having trouble with knowing what to do when, a first then board is literally like a board that has a column for first and a column for then. And it's like first play, then lunch, right? Or whatever it might be. All right. And you can do it with Velcro and pictures. You can do it for older kids with words, with, things like that. So that's a note to myself. Oh, maybe that would be useful for this child. It also felt to me like an opportunity to help that child understand what was going on for him, right? Oh, you're upset right now. It's really hard for you that you can't eat. You're really hungry. I understand. To let him know that he was heard, right? It didn't happen. The teacher did not do that. The teacher was more focused on getting him to put his lunch back, right? At 11:12, after this had gone on for a few minutes back and forth with them, she just kind of left him. I don't know if she was, I had the impression that the child was someone they had been struggling with for a while. And so I don't know if she was kind of throwing her hands up, but for 1 year, she walked away to attend to something else in the classroom, but he was still pretty upset, right? And what happened was he went and he knocked down someone else's magnetite tower that they were building, right? When that happened, again, no discussion about Matthew's emotions, about what was going on for him. They pointed out to him what he did. Hey, you knocked that down. Look at your friend's face. He's really upset. That's a thing that we do, right? That's a very normal reaction to have in a preschool classroom, right? We want them to notice that their actions have an effect on other people, right? For me, what this was telling me was we are missing from here 11:08, right? Or maybe if you want to not go that far back, even from the upset with the lunchbox, we're having an opportunity to also let Matthew know that we get that something's going on for him and help him learn more about his emotions, right? And it kind of didn't really work because they weren't doing that piece. You got to manage a child's emotion before you can start to have them think about what they did or make repairs or whatever it is you need to do, especially at 2, right? Where they're all learning how to do this, right? So then at 11:14, the teacher was like, hey, why don't you come with me? Let's go read a book together and calm down, right? So that's, teacher takes Matthew to read a book. He was calm for a bit, but when other kids come over, near the book that he was reading with the teacher, he got upset again. This continued on for several more minutes. But you get the sense, right? So I'm looking at this and I'm starting to see a pattern. Okay, Matthew's upset about something. We're not really maybe helping him focus on that as much as he could. And then he does something else because he's got all this emotion happening and he's going to lash out, right? Then even after that, we're still not doing that. We're going to take him over to read a book, which is a perfectly great thing to do to help him calm down, but we still haven't really let him know that we see him and that we understand. So when I go then to talk to the teachers in a week or so about what I saw, I'll say, hey, here's something I noticed. I wonder what would have happened if we had taken a little more time to process with Matthew what was going on for him. What do you think? Right? So that's what I'm doing when I'm coming in observing. I also use the same format to write down what I think might be going on. So-and-so joins these kids socially, somebody yells at him and he runs away, right? And that's the stuff that I then report back on. Okay, but that's how I do it. This is the STAIR that we were talking about before. It stands for the Scale for Teachers' Assessment of Routines Engagement. Doesn't really matter. You can see the directions here. Essentially, it's 10-minute blocks, right? And this particular one on this slide is the arrival. And then you're talking about how engaged are they? Are they engaged, for 1 minute with adults, and which of these, sorry, not 1 minute for adults. Those numbers there are the none of the time, little of the time, half the time, much, or all, right? And for how long, and then their kind of level of engagement, non-engaged, unsophisticated, average, advanced, or sophisticated. So you're looking at, are they engaging with adults? How much? Are they engaging with peers? How much? Are they engaging with materials? How much? And what does that engagement look like, right? And you put little notes of how many minutes it was, and then you want to make sure it adds up. So that's just another way of looking at routines, right? So that maybe in circle time, you notice that his engagement or her engagement is a lot less than during, say, free choice, right? That tells you something, right? Or maybe this child is consistently, doing more with materials than with peers, right? That tells us something, right? All kinds of things that we can glean from this kind of data. Okay, so any questions about that? In a second, I'm going to break you up into a few different little mini groups to talk about this, but any questions before I move on? No? Okay. All right. What we're going to do here in a minute I will cut and paste these into the chat window because I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can divide you into groups. I wonder if I can do that from here, actually. Can I? Oh, I can. Okay, so I think I can even leave it. So in a second, what we're going to do is, before we get to reporting, I'm going to break you up into groups. If you've done this before, this is a function that Zoom has called breakout rooms. It's going to I'm going to push a button, and it's going to kind of like Harry Potter portkey style, sweep you off into your own little private room with other people. And I want you to discuss these 3 things. Okay, we'll take about 5 or 6 minutes, something like that. I will pop into the different rooms and check in. Which of these methods that we just talked about resonates the most with you, or do none of them, right? And why? Can you imagine using any of these in your classroom? And if so, what support would you need in order to use it? So all those ones that we just talked about, so that's the one where you're marking down those particular behaviors. There's the ABC chart, there's the stare, there's just the longhand writing, the time sampling stuff. So those are the things that we're going to do. So what will happen is you'll get shipped off into these different rooms. You can talk to each other for a little bit, and then I'll pop in and say hi and see how everybody's doing. You'll then get a notice. Rooms are going to close in about a minute. And at the end of that, you're all going to get swept back into this cooperative space, and then we'll share back. Okay? Any questions about that? So I'm not sure, Rachel, where you will end up because being on the phone, but I think you should be able to see on your screen who you're with, even if your picture is not showing up for them. Okay? So I'm going to split you up right now. Everybody ready? How many people here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
10, I thought.
Okay. So I'm going to split everybody up into 3 rooms. So there'll be 2 to 3 participants in each room. Okay. Are we ready? On your mark, get set, and go. I think you may have to click the thing that says join breakout room.
Where should it say that?
You should have gotten a little thing that says, are you in full screen mode?
Oh no, should I be?
No, if you get out of it, you'll. And Christine, it looks like you haven't joined yet either.
What did I do? Let's see.
Okay, Christine went. Ashley, you got nothing?
Here, what am I doing wrong? It worked last time when you did it.
Let me see if I can do you manually, okay? Give me a second.
Okay.
Signed time, pin video, chat. So you never got any notice that was like, join this group?
Should I be in full screen or no?
No, it's better if you're not.
No, but I'm not.
Stop sharing my screen and see if that changes anything.
That's so weird. Last time it worked.
All right, hold on. Let me see if I can do this a different way. It's so weird.
I'm like looking if there's something like I can push.
Yeah, there
It should have just like popped up, right?
Yeah, you should have just gone right in. Let me just like Google real quick. Sorry, Ashley, that's a bummer. Well, you and I can talk about
It's
it.
okay. Right?
While I look this up, are there any of these that are speaking to you?
The one that's speaking to me the most is the ABC one.
Okay.
Because as you were talking, I was actually thinking about not me working with the teens directly, but like the Madrahim component. But I also work in our Kesher program, which is the 3rd and 5th grade experiential learning.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the 4th graders kind of like acts out and like, you know, does those funny jokes. And there's a couple other kids in different programs that I've heard about. So if I were to work with Rabbi Lisa and bring these to those specific teachers in Madrahim, and that could be like a role for one of the Madrahim to do of like, oh, I'm noticing this, like, you know, what happened right before, then they did this action, what did whoever it was do right after, to start to potentially see a pattern. Then we could like work on it with the teacher, with the Madrahim. You know, I think that would be like a really efficient model since we only see these kids like, you know, I think it's like 25 times throughout the year.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's a good way to do it. I mean, and you have someone there that can pay that kind of attention. That'll give you then a good sense. I'm not seeing how to fix this. I'm sorry, that's never happened to me before.
No, you've had a lot of tech glitches today. I'm sorry.
Weird. Okay.
Because yeah, last time we did this, I remember I got some type of, and I like pushed whatever it was, and
it's not
went
even,
away.
I'm like clicking on your name and kind of trying to. Here's what I'm gonna do. All right, we're gonna try something. I'm gonna make you a co-host. Okay.
Okay. Ooh, fancy.
Which I think should now give you an option to go and like join in a breakout room. Do you see down at the bottom a little icon that says breakout rooms? It's like four squares in a box.
4 square. I'm like just wondering if I'm on the wrong. No, that's not that. 4 squares in a box. No. Like on the bottom of my screen, it says the mute, stop video, invite participants, share screen, chat, and the more, when I click on it, it says disable video receiving, and then leave meeting. That's like what and then on the right-hand side is like, I have the participants up, but I can close that out. That's not.
Yeah. Because maybe the breakout rooms aren't enabled on that account or something. I don't know. You shouldn't have to do that though. All right. Well, I'm sorry.
I wonder if it's only on this computer. Last time I was on a different computer. This time I got a laptop since.
Okay.
So I wonder if it's something with the computer itself.
All right. Well, maybe offline you and I can like work on it sometime, so that next time when you come, it works.
Okay. I can also I just like click on something. I could actually download Zoom to the computer probably.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you could try that.
I don't know.
All right, I'm gonna go check in on the other groups for a minute, okay, and see.
Yes, absolutely, not a problem.
Thank you.
Issues and then parents. Oh, okay. That I never thought about that. How to share strategies with other teachers or parents, you know, that works, you know, about certain behaviors. Yeah. So that would be maybe the 2 daily behavior checklist or the ABC.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a way that you can even like simply like have just like a 1 page of that checklist like with all the children, so it's just basically just like a
like just straight across
straight chart like with like the children's names and then like you know the behaviors, and you just mark everything if you see something. You can do that.
Yeah, that you could just make like a Excel spreadsheet and
Yeah.
just have it. That's a great idea.
Like just have a carry, like you have a clipboard in the classroom, and if you see something, just make a mark.
Yeah, for all the children then, right? Yeah, that would be for all the children. Yeah. Yeah, eventually coming down to it, we tend to focus only on what, on the misbehavior, certain behaviors, and we don't, Yeah, I mean, it's where do you find it? For me, the question is always where do you find the time to do? How do you find the time to do all that? It's
Right.
yeah.
Oh, these are the other questions.
Which of
Everyone
these?
okay?
Collection?
Everyone good in here?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're like, it's like we have an idea of which ones we would like to use and how we could use them. It's like, yeah, I think we're at how do we find the correct support to make
Great.
sure that,
All right, cool. All right,
And I just want to add, for me, of like the initial stages of how to empower counselors to be able to start, and then at what point like do I come in. But I think it's a good tool because sometimes I have counselors who are just like, he's always hitting or he's always running, but it's like, what is always? So to have a way to be able to actually track it and try to help them get into the observation mode. But yeah, would love a little assistance of like how to then train or introduce, and maybe that's something we do together in your training for winter camp, but that's something I'm thinking about.
All right, couple more minutes and then we'll all come back together. Okay.
The situation in your classroom?
Hi guys.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, 'cause hi, David.
Just coming in to say hi and see how you're doing. Conversation going okay?
Yeah, we're on question 2 now. Can you imagine using it in your own classroom?
Great.
Yeah. So Harriet?
Are there any that are
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm trying to see if there's any particular time that this child acts out more or less. And as I say, I've only been there about 3 times, so it's hard to tell. I noticed after recess that he's like very athletic. And so, and in fact, one of the reasons the principal hired me is because I must have had on some interview, one of my hobbies is yoga. It's not really a hobby, it's supposed to be part of your life. But she said, after recess, why don't you just do some like relaxing pose? And so that may help with this kid because he probably could have stayed out in the schoolyard for an hour, not happy to have to come in. Yeah.
A couple more minutes and then we'll all come back together. I'm going to go say hi to the
Okay.
room.
Thanks.
Instead of something else brewing. It sounds like it's just 3-year-old stuff to me, but I don't know this child. So
Yeah.
Hi, David.
Hi, Dave.
I just wanted to say hi. We had poor Ashley got not put in a breakout room somehow, so you're only 2 of you in here. That should have been 3. But
yeah. Yeah, we were just she was kind of helping me out with I have in one of the classrooms I work with, we already have one child that has been diagnosed. She's high functioning, and during rest time it's very, very much a challenge because one teacher is already taken out. She has to lay with her because I mean if we're not there, she'll scream and shout and jump on her mat and everything. So, and she's very good at laying with her. I actually have been able to get her to sleep too. I just with her, I found if I just lay down and pretend I'm asleep, she calms down on her own. Carla, the other teacher has her own technique with her. But there's another child that just today I almost lost it, Dave. He just challenged me. He knocked my glass. I thought he was coming in for a hug. He knocked my glasses off, knocked my hat off. And it was a multitude step of things. He just, first, started throwing the stuffies around. Then he started throwing his mat around. And then, so each thing I put away, and then he walked over and kicked over the little bin that we keep our dustpans in and everything. And it was just, so it got to a point where I told him I was going to take him into, because sometimes if I have that, I'll take him into the, to sit with, the assistant director. But he was like, oh yeah, because he realized he goes there, he gets to do the puzzles, he gets to do the Legos, So I was like, okay, well that's not working because it's not, it's more of a reward now. He's realizing, because he's very intelligent too. I forgot to mention that with Rachel.
Yeah, interesting.
He's very intelligent.
Yeah. I'm gonna just I'm gonna just pop it. I just want to. We got about 1 more minute, and then I'm gonna close the rooms.
Okay.
See you guys in a couple.
All right. Yeah. No, I love you.
Hello. Oh wait, now I can't hear you.
I got muted. Now I'm not muted. Okay.
Oh, no. Oh, okay. Now I can hear you. That makes sense.
I'm so sorry. I'm not sure. It's really weird. It's like I can't even sort.
It could be on my end.
Sort you into the room. Anyway, well, so if you were to, since it's you, I'm going to bring everyone back in a minute or so. But if you were to implement like that, like ABC stuff, what would be sort of the first step to make that happen? Do you think that you would need to do?
The first steps would be to check in with Rabbi Lisa, because ultimately she's running those programs like Rishonim and Kesher, and kind of work alongside her to talk to the teachers and talk to the Madrahim about like, what is this worksheet? What's the expectation? I view this more as an internal document, at least to start, and really rather than opening it up to everyone, focusing on a few key students, so like reaching out to those particular teachers and Madrahim to start, and then sort of see where it goes from there is kind of my thinking.
Nice.
Does that sound like the right path, do you think?
I think you want to talk to her, and then then you want to identify who's going to do it, and I think that's a good way to go, and then try it out. I think it would
right.
Just kind of see if it's useful, right? But I think getting her buy-in and then figuring out who's going to do it. I think that seems reasonable.
Yeah, I think once you're able to send out the slides, and I think you said like we could download like the PDF. Once I have that, like I can just send her an email and say, hey, like I was in this workshop and this was one of the takeaways. What do you think, kind of thing?
Yeah, that seems great. And then any thoughts about like what you might do with that once you have that information? What do you imagine doing with it?
Well, like for instance, like with Archer, right? When you were here, we brought up Archer. Yeah. And sort of like if we have those sort of details, right, of, like you were saying, does this happen like during transitions? Does this happen, when there's loud noises? Like sort of if we can kind of find a pattern to then work with that and to sort of share that with the parents. Like, we've noticed that every time X happens, this is what he does, and first of all, is that something that like happens at home in their regular school? And also, what do they do to help him be able to, transition better, whatever. I say transition because that's like what Diana was saying, but maybe there's other things too that I'm unaware of.
Yeah, great. Excellent. All right, thank you. Okay, I think everyone is back now. Welcome back. So anybody want to share a little bit of what they talked about? Any particular things that came up about which one you're most responding to?
Well, Rachel and I had a nice conversation, and she actually gave me some good tips that she already uses. And I definitely like the fact that you're going to give us the printout for, the charts and things. And, like I told Rachel, I think it'd be great for you. I like your idea of the way I'm looking at it is, just taking notes and then later maybe applying, and see where they fit in with the charts and things of that nature.
Great.
Because I need help.
we all do, right? Anybody else is that resonating with? What seemed good for the other folks on here? Make sure you unmute yourself if you want to speak. Christine, are you trying to talk? I think you're.
Yeah. All right. Do you hear? Yeah. Our discussion was what chart to choose even from. At the beginning, what do you want to observe and what would fit better with what we want to observe. I like the daily behavior checklist and the ABC, but depending on what you look at, that's what you need to have in the back of your mind already, an idea of what doesn't work too much. And the ABC, I think, is great if you want to share with parents, for example, what you do, to see the sequence. That's what happened before. This is what happened, and it's what we did. And kind of building as a team with parents and other teachers, like consistency or the consequences. It really depends on the next question. The level of the question we had is, how do you use practically in the classroom when you're constantly interacting with children? We don't carry a notebook. We already have to take pictures. We take mental notes all the time. We're constantly involved with the children. This is my question. How do you you set yourself out. You need to have someone else coming in the class, and you kind of back out and like objectively look at your environment and the child interacting, which can be very hard when you are always engaged with the children. That was my first question, actually. Yeah, like
that's part of the reason for the kind of brief, the like that behavior checklist, for example. What's nice about that one is that just really quickly, like what, after you're done cleaning the tables or whatever, or even like, while the kids are finishing up their lunch, you can take 2 seconds and just mark that. Because you don't have the time to like write pages and pages of notes like I do, right, when I show up there, right? So I think, and even the ABC stuff, when things happen that are particularly, stand out to you, that's you can just take it. It does not take actually that long to fill out that row of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Those are going to be easier to use on the fly than like the complicated longhand time.
Yes, yeah.
Time sampling, you really need someone who's only doing that, because otherwise you're going to miss it. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right? But if you have somebody who's a support teacher, a floater, whatever, who either come in and take over for you while you do that, or have them do that, or whatever, maybe that is a way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody from the first group? Ashley, Katrina, Chris, no, that was that group. Sarah, Harriet, and Rachel. Anything that you guys want to share from your discussion?
Well, we were actually kind of talking about how, because Sarah and Harriet are like Hebrew school teachers.
Yeah.
So we were talking about how it's kind of different in the sense that like they're not seeing their children every day.
Mm-hmm.
And they're only seeing them for a short period of time, and talking about like which ones for them would be helpful for such a small amount of time, I guess. Whereas like I was saying, like I see my kids every day. So like for me, I really like the ABC chart. I don't know if I would I don't know if I would have the columns. Like I think I would make, just kind of like write it out. But we had a kid in our class where like that is what we were doing to try to figure out what his triggers were. And I like and in some sense, I guess like having it laid out in a chart is nice, because it's easily presentable. Like if you're trying to communicate with parents, it's very clear, like this is what was happening before, this is what the behavior was, and this is what happened after.
Mm-hmm.
So we did kind of talk about that, but we were talking about sort of the difference in terms of like, I see my children 5 days a week for like 8 hours.
Yeah, it's different.
Whereas, so yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about.
Great. Bob?
Well, I just want to comment on like with Christine, because actually I'm one of Christine's I'm her support teacher. I think also that kind of makes it a bit challenging because the children are already familiar with us too. So like if I'm stepping into her role or vice versa, how do you really like just be there just to observe? Because the children are going to be approaching us,
Can you open my water bottle?
Yeah, exactly. So it would make it a bit challenging. So I think if we were going to have to do that, I think they would have to have like, maybe one of the assistant director or director come in one of our places and do that, because I think it would just be too challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So not all of these work for every environment. It's really kind of what works the most for you with your students, your situation, right? We just offer like a wide range because it's, there's lots of ways to do this, right? So for you, the time sampling is maybe not the best one, but maybe the behavior checklist would work, or maybe an ABC chart, stuff like that. So, all right, great. Okay, so we're going to just come back to I'm going to kind of reshare this again. Okay, so we just finished this. So now we're going to talk about reporting. This is reporting to parents. And again, we'll spend an hour and a half on this in a month. So this is just really brief, right? When you're going to talk to parents about this stuff, right, what helps? These are the main things that, from talking to parents, from my observations, and from kind of being a part of a lot of these conversations, seem to help the most. Reaching out early, right? Not waiting until a lot of time has passed. Parents don't like to feel blindsided, right? We personally, when my older daughter was in preschool, I think like in July, the teachers asked us for like a meeting, like after the entire year, when she was like almost done with the program, and said, oh, we've been having some issues. And apparently they've been happening all year long, right? And we were like, really? It's July and we haven't heard anything about this before, right? And it made us feel kind of blindsided, and it was not a good feeling, right? besides the fact that the year was done, right? I mean, there was like 6 weeks left of school. So anyway, reaching out early, being specific, and that's where the data can really help, because you can say exactly what was going on. You know, because otherwise, if it's like, oh yeah, there's a way in which they kind of take over the class, like that, you know, or they're being really over assertive, like that's not really specific. Like, what is my kid doing? Right? She is not letting other people decide how to play this game. She is, you know, throwing her book out the window every time it's time for silent reading, whatever it might be. You know, being specific. Keeping the tone respectful and non-alarmist and non-shaming is really critical. Relationships between teachers and parents can get really tense really quickly, and that is not a good outcome for anybody. They owe you the same courtesy, by the way, that I'm telling you, right? You owe them, right? I tell parents to do the same thing for teachers, right? Teachers don't like to feel like they're being judged or you know, being yelled at, right? Nobody likes that. So we always want to keep things respectful, non-alarmist, meaning like, not trying to freak anybody out, right? Especially if you are suspecting autism or something like that. Like, do not use that word until you have really thought about and talked through with your team, with your director, how it's going to go, right? Because that will just that will just turn the alerts on high, right? And then you're done, right? So you got to be ready for that. So that's why whenever I do these things, it's not about alarming people, it's about figuring out what's going on. It's not a cause for alarm, it's a cause for you know, a plan, a thought, conversation, right? And non-shaming, right? I mean, none of you are ever going to intentionally shame any parents, right? But parents are very kind of protective of their own and very unsure of their own abilities a lot of the time, right? And so we want to make sure that we're not in any way suggesting that we think they're a bad parent or they're doing something wrong. The same way that they should do that for you, right? You don't want to be shamed either. Seeing parents as partners, right? Let's work on this together. Seeing parents as experts, right? We all often say, you are experts in child development and on many different children. A parent is an expert on their child, right? For sure. You may also be an expert on their child, but in a different way, right? You're an expert on their child during the time that you see them, right? And for the time that you have them, which for preschool is a lot, for religious school is a little, right? And everything in between. But they are the expert on their child. You're experts on children in general. They're the expert on their child. And going in with that in mind, it seems to reinforce the idea of them as parents and partnering up. And it sounds simple, but listen, right? Just hear what they have to say, hear what their responses are. You'll get a sense very quickly for whether or not they think you're on the right track, for whether or not they're open to additional supports, for whether they want to just shut it down, right? All of that stuff, because you get all kinds of parents, some that really want to be like, thank you for pointing this out, what can we do to help? And some that are like, what's wrong with you? My kid is a perfect angel. They don't do any of these things, right? And you got to listen to know which parent you have in front of you, right? So that's one thing. Now, if you think you need an assessment, right? So usually somebody asked before about when kind of observation turns into a need for action. Usually a lot of the behaviors that we see are typical for different kinds of kids at different stages of development. Mostly it comes down to intensity and frequency, right? How often is this behavior happening and how intense is it when it happens, right? If it is markedly more frequent or markedly more intense or markedly more frequent and intense than the others of their age in that classroom, right? That's cause for further exploration sometimes. And if you're always, you can always talk to me, either on the phone or have me come in and do an observation and we can discuss it, whether or not, what path you might want to go down to, or just, you yourself, whether you're going to get your antenna up or not, really comes down to frequency and intensity of the behavior. We all have bad days. We all have behaviors that we do. It's just how often is it happening and how strong is it, right? When you do if you think that might be where you're going, you want to express the concern without alarming the parent. Right? So saying something like, it might be useful to get some outside help to better understand what's going on. Not, I think your child might have autism, right? But it might be, I would love to get some outside help to figure out what's happening, right? That's not alarmist. That's just, okay, we need to look at this, right? Are they still going to get anxious about it? Sure, right? But in a different way. Getting their buy-in, right, is really important. So for example, more information would really help us to understand better how to help him or her be successful. What do you think about getting that information? What do you think about having David come? What do you think about having so-and-so come? What do you think about going and getting an occupational therapy assessment, right? Get their buy-in. Don't just tell them that this is what has to happen. What do you think? How does that feel to you? Parents have all kinds of reactions about labels and diagnosis and assessment. And so you're going to be working at a disadvantage if you don't have their buy-in. And then be ready with a few referrals, right? So I have a few referrals for you on the next couple of slides, just where you know how to send people, okay? So here's a bunch of them. Jewish Learning Networks, that's me, that's us, right? You can send them to me. You can reach out to me too. We support educators and families both. Jewish Family and Community Services, or Jewish Family and Children's Services, depending on which region you're in, right, of the Bay Area, or Parents Place. Are great organizations that have a lot of clinical support they can offer, because we have people who are on the peninsula in Marin and San Francisco, as well as people in the East Bay on this webinar. I have both of the links there, so you'll get those. They offer clinical support, they offer preschool consultation and observation, and many other things. That's a great resource. School districts, right? For those of you in preschool, not helpful. For those of you with older kids, after 3, it becomes the province of the school district, right? So if your child, and even actually in preschool, if you're 3 or older, it becomes it's about you go to the school district, their local school district, whatever that might be, right? For 0 to 3 or out of school time for older kids, there's the regional centers. So that's state-run. That's the state agency that administers services to people, to children and to families. They're state-funded, and as I said, they go from 0 to 3-year-old, as well as activities that happen outside of school time, because in school time it's just school district, but outside of that it's not. And there are many of them throughout California. The 3 that are represented by the people who are here today are the Golden Gate Regional Center, which covers San Francisco and Marin, parts of the peninsula. The regional center of the East Bay is the East Bay, go figure. And then San Andreas Regional Center is further south, so like South Bay, like Palo Alto and points further south, right? That link that's there is a list, is a link to all of them. It has their websites, their phone numbers, all of that stuff. There are also a lot of parent support organizations that are out there that parents can go to for help, to talk to people, to get support, to find other resources. In the East Bay, there's SEED Lafayette, which they're located in, as the name suggests, Lafayette. But for people that live in like Alameda County or near Contra Costa County, they're a really great organization. Bananas Bunch, or just Bananas, is in Oakland. And Family Resource Navigators used to be Family Resource Network of Alameda County or something like that. Now it's called Family Resource Navigators. These are all good places to send families for more information. In the North Bay, we have Matrix Parent Network. They cover like kind of Marin, Sonoma, and the Child Parent Institute is further north. Matrix Parent Network has a lot of classes. They have a whole resource center with books, lists of therapists, things like that. And they can be helpful. Child Parent Institute has support groups, offers therapy as well for people that are far in the North Bay. I don't think we have anybody like that on here, but since we have at least one person who lives in Marin, I wanted to include that. Down on the peninsula in the South Bay, Community Gate Path, which is in San Mateo, and Parents Helping Parents are 2 great ones. Parents Helping Parents in particular has an amazing event calendar that lists events and resources from all over the Bay Area. And I send out a monthly newsletter as well to families. A lot of what I put on there from them. And then in San Francisco, Support for Families. Support for Families.
Hey, can you email me?
Name? What they call
it's communications.
Oh, someone already did it. Great.
Okay.
Who appears as
Communication.
You get the pictures from Katie? No, did you get them? I don't know, but
okay, I'm muting everything. All right. So Support for Families is that organization in San Francisco. They have a lot of events and also support groups and things like that. So I know that we're kind of at time, partly because of our technical difficulties. I apologize for that. But if there are any questions, I can stick around for a few more minutes. If people want to leave, definitely you can. What I do want to give you before you go is there is a link, and this will be on the Padlet as well, which I will send you all the link to again. But there is oops. There is an evaluation that I would love for you all to fill out. I'm going to put it into the chat box now. so that you can have that. It really just takes 5 minutes, I promise. It's like 6 questions, but we always are trying to improve on things like that. So that's there. It's also in the Padlet that I will send to you all again. And then beyond that, if you have questions, I mean, you guys all have my email because you've been on all the messages about this. Feel free to reach out. I do offer, any kind of support to educators. If you just email me or call me, we're not going to charge you for that. The only time that things have a fee is if I'm coming there and doing stuff for you. But are there any questions before we say goodbye?
Yeah. I know you were saying like different wording on how to ask, like if a child has received help before or has some sort of learning been tested. Is it okay to ask, like, can you ask, like, if the child's learning style has been tested? Like, is that like, has your child's learning style been tested?
Probably you wouldn't use learning style for that. You could, because there's not really a test for that per se.
Well, I know that there's tests like for accessibility, like testing, like for like how
accommodations.
I know like I was tested like for like a learning challenge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So then I would not use learning style. Is more like, are you a visual learner, an auditory learner?
Okay.
You could say, has your child had like an educational assessment, a developmental assessment, a psycho, has your child been, have you ever sought any help for possible accommodations or for learning challenges or developmental challenges? Like those are the kinds of words that you would use. Learning style is a specific something else that's not exactly what you're talking about. But I think it is okay to ask, has your child been assessed? Now, when you do that, though, you of course want to make sure that you've already connected your relationship, had some conversations with the parents, so that you're not just dropping that on them, right? Because that opens up a whole can of worms for people.
Right.
But certainly in the context of discussing what's been going on at a parent-teacher conference, if you think it might be warranted, you can say, I'm curious, have you ever done that? What would you think about it? Because it might be helpful to get outside information. Have you done that?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That's where I would put it.
Okay.
But yeah,
Thank you.
It is okay to ask that.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? No?
No.
Well, great. So thank you all very much. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties that we had here. I will iron them out before we get together again next month when we'll talk more about parent. Oh, yes.
So what is the date for next month? Because I'm going to be.
That is a great question. I will look it up right now. It's December. I want to say 17th, but I'm not.
Oh, okay. We're good then. Okay. I'm just going to be gone for a little while. So
it is the 17th.
Sure I'll be back. Okay. Yeah, I'll be back.
17 to 3:30, same as now. I will send out, before that, like I always do, the link and everything. And then today, before the end of the day, I will send you the slides and I will send you the link to the Padlet again, which hopefully I'll futz with the sharing settings to make sure you can access it. And then in that, you will see, I can share my screen and just show you, for those of you that are still here, what it will look like for you. So this is what it looks like. This is where we were trying to. Someone got in. Bob got in.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So maybe what I did helped. Okay, so resources for data collection. This is where you'll find the behavior checklist, and you can just click on it, and then you'll be able to download it. Here's an ABC chart. Here's the STAIR. Okay, so those are the 3 that are there. What next? I should tell you all, actually tomorrow, Pamela Schuler is coming. She's going to be here and doing a series of events for us. And some are happening at our office, some are happening all around the Bay. One's for teen educators, things like that. But there's a link to you should have all heard about it already, but there's a link to our website about that. There's other virtual learning experiences coming up. Bobby Turan is doing one on Israel through creative media. We have a project-based learning series. And then I have our special needs 101 this fall. In the spring, I'm doing a special needs 201 series, which is going to do a deep dive into some particular diagnoses. I think autism, ADHD, and sensory, where we'll really dive deeply into those at a more advanced level. And then here on the far right column is the link to the evaluation that you'll be able to fill out. So I think I still have a few of us left. Hopefully you'll be able to find everything there. And hopefully that what I did with the Padlet will actually fix it now. So, but anyway, I'll look at it again to make sure. But you should all be able to access that stuff.
Awesome.
Okay?
Thanks, Dave.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Have a good day.